G'day guys, welcome to Ask Woodford, episode 47. I'm glad I got this right. This is a very special episode for me because, number one, the last two episodes have been horrendous. I reckon the one before, 47, 46, 45 was terrible, and 46 I just walked off, was Brick. So 47, we've gone, no offense to Brick, Brick's a smart man, but we've gone from Brick to the doctor. So I'm going to introduce now to you guys. A lot of people ask me where I get my neuro knowledge from. Pretty much everything I learned my neuro stuff was from a fourth year honours, and it was through this man here, Dr. Alan Pearce, who, actually I'll let Alan explain his background, but for my, I'll just give a little bit of background in terms of how we met. I did undergrad at VU. I first met Alan through motor control in second year. Also met another guy who I want to shout out to, Dawson Kidgel, who's my secondary supervisor. They were both looking at, neurophysiological mechanisms behind strength training, using a technique which Alan's going to talk about, not me, TMS, Transcranial Magnetic Stimulation. And I was really interested, met Alan, he took me on. I said to Alan the first time I really talked to him one-on-one, I said, if you take me on, I'll always be loyal to you, always stay with you. I reached out to Alan probably 2 months ago. We got back in contact, hadn't seen each other for probably 8-9 years, and the friendship's blossomed from there as always. Nothing's changed. So welcome, Alan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to give a little bit of background to everyone out there, just about your, what you've done, where you started from? I mean, I remember seeing your PhD and seeing the skinny, the photos of you lifting weights and how skinny you were, and a young man. So just want to explain your background and everything you've done.
All right, to the camera?
To the camera, yes, to the camera.
All right. Okay, so I grew up in Perth. I did my undergrad at University in getting a Bachelor of Science, and I did an honours, a fourth year honours, looking at the neurophysiology of delayed onset muscle soreness. So trying to look at and see how the central nervous system reacted after a bout of eccentric training through the biceps muscle. The technique I used to look at that was a technique that Woody has just said, transcranial magnetic stimulation. It allows us to look at the central nervous system changes, and I kind of got bitten by the bug of stimulating brains and having a look at the responses, and so I moved into a PhD in clinical neurophysiology through the Department of Medicine at University of Western Australia, where I did that from 1996 to 1999, and then decided to move across to Melbourne for more opportunities. I did get some practical aspects of athlete preparation and training by being one of the national coaches for the Sydney Olympics badminton team in 2000. And then followed it up by being manager of coach education and sports science at Tennis Australia from 2002 to 2004. So I've got practical experience as well, but decided to go back to an academic environment because the science was calling. And so from there, I've been looking at, central nervous system changes with training, but also brain injury, because that's been an area of interest for me, particularly from my days of the PhD. So probably from about 2009, 2010, I've been researching brain injury, in particular concussion, and relating to that, sports-related concussion.
What did you find out, just quickly for everyone out there, what did you find out with your honours project on eccentric loading and delayed onset muscle soreness?
Okay, so what I found obviously was that as the muscle got damaged, there was a greater increase in neural drive to try and compensate for that.
Okay. Yep.
So the waveform that we get, so when I stimulate the motor cortex, we get what we call an evoked potential. That waveform allows us to look at the drive from the motor cortex to the muscle. And as we saw the loss in strength, we saw an increased drive from the motor cortex trying to potentially. We tested up to 28 days, and the most changes were in the first sort of 7 days.
7 days, you still noticed higher neural drive?
Yeah. And then as strength started to return, the evoked potential returned to baseline.
What's the practical implication of that?
Well, probably not so much from the TMS, but we also did a learning task, a motor learning task, a motor control task. And what we found was that compared to a control group that had or they actually improved in the learning task, the people who had muscle damage took longer to return to baseline, but they actually never improved their motor tasks to the control group. And so what happened was that their ability to learn a new skill was impeded. And so whenever we talk about prescribing exercise, if you're doing any eccentric based work that you know that it may induce DOMS, don't use recovery as a skill training session, because you can actually create improper
motor patterns.
Yeah.
When we talk about that,
Don't use recovery as a what?
Skill training.
So don't use a skill to recover. If you're learning a skill, because it's going to be impeded. It's
So
going to
if people are doing a training program, and we've got a heavy day, we're doing an eccentric. Okay, the next day or a couple of days after, we'll just work on some skills just to let you recover.
And that's So do you understand what you're saying? Yeah. So they do that though, and that's the worst thing, because you're going to create negative motor patterns. When we talk about the motor cortex, for everyone out there, if you don't understand, M1 is stored in the frontal lobe. So the frontal lobe.
M1 is primary motor cortex,
yeah.
or the acronyms.
Yeah, sorry. So this is good. Actually, when we had a coffee at Dak Dak, there's a shout out to Dak Dak, love you, Ben. Went over to Dak Dak, and when I heard Al speak, we're conversing about motor units, and we're talking about TMS. For me, I kind of like it. I like talking to people, especially guys like himself who understand it. It's fantastic. But then you kind of talk to anyone else, like nervous system. I didn't know the nervous system drives and controls muscle contraction. And by the way, I use your quote. You can ask him over. I quote you every time. Every time I go around Australia, I've been in New Zealand. We went to New Zealand. I always say,
I need some royalties for this.
No, but I always say you can vouch for me. What is it? There was something you said to me, and I said that without you, and I said this. You said this one of the third or fourth days I was doing my honours. You said, without the central nervous system, we're just slabs of meat. Am I right? I've always said that was you. And I still remember that. It was a fantastic quote, because I always use, most people don't talk about this enough. But now, it's finally, people start, because you can't see, it's not like I walk around and go, that athlete's got a efficient and firing nervous system. You can't see anything.
No.
They just look at their muscles and say, oh, he's a big, strong guy. That makes him athletic. We know that's not the case.
Yeah,
but the majority of the population think that. And that's what you said to me about concussion. You can't see concussion.
No, it's a hidden injury.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Hidden injury. So, why did you, I mean, a quick question for you. Why did you change from, because you were working in that performance, I know you were starting to move away from it. Why did you decide to go to concussion now?
Because I could see that there was going to be an issue.
Sure.
The first sort of indications of the coming wave of concussion and sports-related concussion was coming from America from around 2005, 2006. So Bennett Omalu published the first paper on chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, in a non-boxing athlete. So this was the first one in football. We've known since 1928 that boxing and combat sports can lead to neurodegeneration.
Yep.
Alzheimer's, dementias, Parkinson's,
MS.
motor neuron disease, MND, multiple sclerosis is a different one, but not in other sports. So 2005, and if anyone's seen that movie Concussion with Will Smith, it documents Bennett Omalu, who published the first case study, in Mike Webster.
What's he doing now? That Bennett Omalu guy?
He's still doing work, yep. He's still in the area.
Oh, but they tried to shut him out for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
Because he was kind of like ostracised.
Yep.
But then obviously he turned around, like in terms of that he exposed what was happening.
Yeah.
You know, to call out to do research with these big sports must be hard for guys like him, like in terms of doing that. I mean,
oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Because you kind of, people were saying, this is what we've done for so long. This is the sport. They would kind of get their backs up against the wall. I'm guessing.
Oh yeah. You're challenging the status quo. You're challenging something that is a way of life.
Yeah.
It's everyone is involved in it, and it's not just for people playing, but spectators. It's a
everyone.
big business. So if something like this happens, it can be disruptive.
Keep going. You were saying they went from the study was on boxers, and then they moved away from it.
Oh no, there's still research in there. Yep. So it took about 50 odd years before boxing actually acknowledged that repetitive hits to the brain.
And that's why they went from 15 rounds to 12 rounds. That was one of the reasons.
Well, that too, and also that if someone was knocked out, then they can't compete for another 4 to 6 weeks.
Well, what were they doing before that?
Oh, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, I'd probably just gone straight. They made
I assume so.
Because the UFC, I know for a fact, is they do these medicals where they have to sit out for depending how the injury was for X amount of time.
Yep.
Which is obviously monitoring these symptoms. I guess that's why they do it. Yeah.
But it's also the repetitive trauma that goes with it. So it's not just the big knockout; it's the the constant sort of punch knock.
Yeah.
Do you call that sub-concussive trauma?
Yeah. So
how would you define that?
Yeah, that's a tough one to define. But generally speaking, we're talking about significant impact that doesn't create any observable symptoms. So it's not as one doctor tried to say to me, if you flick your head, is that a subconcussion? No. But if you see someone take a fairly sizable hit on the field, but then they get up and they keep running on as if nothing had changed, that's likely to be a subconcussive impact. So if there's no symptoms, then technically it's not a concussion.
Yeah. Okay, that's hard to define.
Yeah.
Grey areas.
Do you mind if I jump in, Kate?
Do what you got. Yeah.
Do we know the results or the potential chronic issues with repeated subconcussive trauma, like frequent headers in soccer, like frequent rapid velocity head movements from like a car accidents?
Yeah, so the evidence is emerging. There have been some clusters of motor neuron disease in Italian soccer players who played in the 1970s, who are now showing signs of dementia and motor neuron disease. There have been UK Premier League football players from the 1960s and 1970s now showing signs of Alzheimer's and dementia. There's been several case studies of CTE in soccer players from the UK. And then in 2017, the Boston group had published a study in the Journal of American Medical Association where they showed 110 of 111 NFL brains showed signs of CTE.
110 out of 111?
Yeah, and they did 217 brains in total, so the other brains were from collegiate sports. So all up, there was about 170 odd cases of CTE out of 217 brains.
Jesus.
Yeah.
So that's saying first of all, that's saying obviously we don't know enough on managing it. I'm guessing that's what it's saying. And the repetitive hits, they bank up over time.
Yeah, that's the idea. That's the concern.
And the biggest issue, though, you think about it from an American football point of view, that's how they love their sport. You think about us, we love the big hits. Oh, that's what they come to football, the blood. You've got to change that. I mean, that's over time. Yeah, okay, that's great for the supporter, but what about for the player after he's retired? That's obviously...
That's right, exactly. And that's what we need to be aware of. And we've got to change the culture around that. We certainly want to have a physicality of the sport.
Of course, yes.
But we want to have the players, if they are suspected of a concussion, to come off.
Yep.
Even if it is a big subconcussive hit, just come off just to double check. Concussion has delayed symptoms. It doesn't have to be straight away. It can manifest over minutes to hours to even the next day or couple of days before the symptoms come through. And so we've got to be quite aware of that. And if we can, for the sake of giving a player a rest for a couple of weeks, we might be able to extend a career for 4 or 5 years. We might even be able to prevent or reduce the risk of long-term neurodegeneration if that occurs.
How long do you have to wait before you can rule out a concussion? Because you said a couple of days. A lot of people give it 24 hours. What do you mean by that? Like before you classify something as a concussion, if you present a symptom 3 days after, right? What about a week after? Like
that's right. We don't know, and that's the problem. So, generally speaking, if a player does come off and gets assessed straight away, they'll probably go back on, and sometimes the symptoms may not come on. So we've got cases of people continuing to play because they've not shown any symptoms, and then they start vomiting in the showers or collapsing in the showers after the game. So it's just a really difficult question to answer.
Yeah. Well, it's not like it's not like a strain which you can see, you can feel it, you know what I'm saying? And just for everyone out there, I asked you this question, very important. I talk about this is because I thought you could see it on an MRI, or we talk about the MRI, right?
Yep.
Can you see it on an MRI? Because then you said to me, you're right. If you can see an MRI, there's obviously something very, very bad going on with your brain.
Yes.
So if there's a concussion, nothing gets picked up by an MRI. No.
That's right. No. So a concussion will not be picked up in imaging for CT or what we call a clinical MRI.
Yeah.
And that is why at the moment, the consensus is that concussion is called a functional injury. So you see changes in function, signs, symptoms, etc.
Yeah.
Whereas if you do pick up something like a bleed or bruising or lesions with an MRI or CT, then that is classified as a structural injury, and then that is determined as a traumatic brain injury.
Okay, yep, I get you.
Do we have any emerging technology that is able to scan or observe the brain's activity to see if there's concussions?
Yep, so there are experimental scannings that are more advanced than MRIs. These are known as diffusion tensor imaging, and so what they show is the physiology of the connectivity between different parts of the brain.
Yep.
So rather than a grey and black and grey image, you get a multicoloured image that shows frontal lobe connecting through the corpus callosum to, say, motor area, to occipital lobe, to the parietal lobes, and the direction that they're projecting to. And if there is damage, then they'll show up as black spots.
Oh.
Yeah. But that's still experimental at the moment.
So it's not, it's not 100%.
Well, it needs to have, enough evidence
To say that,
then for doctors medical doctors to go, okay, yeah, we can
How
now
much does it
trust
cost
that.
for something like that? Is it a lot?
Well, experimentally at the moment, they're costing about $1,000 per scan.
Okay.
Yeah,
Per
but
scan.
it's not available to the public.
Okay,
No.
so we can't use it yet.
No,
Okay,
it's
so,
not.
yeah. That's it. That's good though. If that gets enough body of evidence to say, that's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. So we might get there, but at this stage, one of the things that people need to be aware of too, when you hear about a player going to the hospital for a scan, they're not scanning for concussion. They're scanning for more serious injury.
Yeah.
So if a coach or a spokesperson says, oh, they're being scanned for concussion, that's a myth.
But I think a big issue is as well is a lot of people think, the majority of people think this, right? Oh, he's been cleared of any damage with the MRI to his brain. Most people think he's good to go. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's what you hear all the time.
That's right.
And that's not.
No,
that's not the right way of doing things, especially if it's clear. Because as you said, that's what they like to call a structural issue. Then.
Yeah, that's
right.
right.
If you've got a structural issue, you're in a fair bit of trouble, I'm guessing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
So we need to change the communication or the translation of the language to people, so people can understand what they mean.
Yep. See what I'm saying? How most people would think they've cleared the scan, they're okay.
Yep, that's right.
And they're not. And then, I mean, if you think I've met a few people who had concussion, they got concussive football, and they went to the hospital, came out, and it wasn't until 3 days later, they started having issues with headaches, they couldn't go outside in the sunlight, stuff like that.
Yep.
And that was 2 to 3 days manifested afterwards.
Yep.
So all he had to do was stay in a dark room and be monitored. Because I mean, what else can you do really?
Well, they're changing the rehab around that.
Oh, they are?
Yep. So we now know that doing nothing and being in a blackened out room and not looking at anything or not doing anything is probably the worst thing for...
That's what they've been told to do, yeah.
That's right. So the emerging evidence in the last couple of years now is that, if possible, light cognitive and physical stimulation.
Oh, really?
Very light aerobic activity.
Yep.
Some cognitive stimulation, as long as there's no symptoms being brought on.
Yeah.
So, because what's been happening is that people have been, told to do nothing, stay in the dark, do nothing, and they start to get depressed.
Well, but it would make sense in terms of your background and mine. Wouldn't you want them to stimulate more, to an extent, stimulate more motor neuron recruitment? And you said, John, just lightly?
Well, it's just to try and it's almost like from a more of a metabolic perspective. So if you want to have a recovery, after a heavy session, you'll just get them to do some light work.
Just flush, yeah.
Same principle, but we're only just because of the, I guess, the research in the last sort of 10 to 15 years, we're now starting to look at this issue more seriously.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of traditional ideas are now starting to be questioned.
Well, yeah. Well, it's not enough, as you said, that's where that's why you got into it, because the research needed to go to this area. It's a big issue, especially, I'll be honest, amateur-based clubs. Right now, they've got no idea. And that's nothing bad. No, I don't think anyone's...
No. Well, half the problem is that there is no one available to look after the players. So out in clubland, they don't have access to a medical doctor.
Yeah.
It's too expensive. You can't have a medical doctor like at the elite level.
Yeah.
And that's part of the issue. So you're relying on sports trainers, and no disrespect to sports trainers, but this is a complex neurological issue. So it's tough, and so many clubs, especially out in the regional areas and country areas, they have no one to give them information. This
is a big issue, because this is it's people's families as well. Because girls play these days as well with around country areas and boys, so it's both a big issue of how to best deal with concussion, and this is what you're saying, is there's got to be more research, evidence-based practice, information on how we can best deal with it, because as you said, right now it's kind of the trainers dealing with it, and I don't think anyone's really got a clue what to do. I mean, I've seen guys...
We got a question on that.
Go.
Charlie Dowman, he asked, what is the best way to recover from a concussion, and how do you know the severity of it?
Okay, so there is no longer a classification system for severity of concussion. That went out in 2013 because the symptoms of concussion are really what we call heterogeneous. So no one reacts necessarily the same way after a concussion, and there are probably a constellation of about 15 to 20 different symptoms of concussion, and you might have 2 or 3, you might have another 3 or 4 that are completely different, I might have another 2 or 3 that isn't the same as you guys. And the fact that the way I react might be much worse than what you guys would react. So there can be no real severity for that. So what we say is that a concussion is a concussion. If you are showing any signs or symptoms, irrespective of the severity, you are concussed. Now, the rehab is what we're starting to understand now, is that exercise is probably the best medicine at the moment. So very light exercise. There is a test called the Buffalo Concussion Protocol, came from the University of Buffalo by John Leddy, where they do a graded exercise test on a treadmill to see what level of exercise brings on symptoms post-concussion. So then they can actually tailor a very specific exercise program to that individual. So, working at this heart rate will be able to allow you to exercise without bringing on symptoms.
Okay, yeah.
But not everyone has access to, a treadmill with stigmo and, some other equipment, maybe even an EEG, I don't know. But the idea is that you would try and exercise lightly to the point where you don't get symptoms.
Well,
that's the best we've got at the moment.
That's the best application you got.
But I think we can actually do better.
Yeah. Well, you're right about that. It's not really practical in terms of application. Not everyone has an EEG either. Imagine having an EEG, having a treadmill. But what you're saying, I agree. We can do better than some sort of light exercise until the systems come on. There's got to be something more defined, more structured we can do.
Yeah, and we're looking at that technology, or we're looking at things like biomarkers. So we're looking at blood biomarkers, salivary biomarkers.
So blood biomarkers. Oh.
Yeah. So, there's a class of biomarkers known as microRNAs. They're released from damage. So it could be. So these are derivative of DNA markers. I'm not a biomolecular chemist, so I'm sort of moving outside my area a bit. But essentially, they are released to any sort of damage. So even with muscle, heart, any sort of organ. But there are certain types of microRNAs that are released with mild traumatic brain injury, but that differ from severe traumatic brain injury. So they're very specific. And so what they are, they get released from, and they bypass the blood-brain barrier, so that we can pick up and see the elevation of these microRNAs molecules. But again, very experimental, still trying to determine how specific they are and how good they are at predicting diagnosis of concussion.
I got a question for you. So, the brain sits in here. What is the shift when you get concussed, right? What is the shift of when the brain moves? Like, is there like the shift? Do you know what I'm saying? Because people wear helmets. I want to bring up the helmet thing.
Okay, right.
This is important,
Yeah,
right? You need to hear this because I agree with what you were saying because you've got an opinion. Your opinion holds a lot of weight. Where a lot of people think that helmets help. Now,
I get asked that all the time.
yeah, well, Campbell Somerville, shout out to Campbell, the boxer that I introduced you to,
Okay.
right? He told me it makes complete sense. They used to box amateurs with helmets,
Yes.
but they took them off because they realised it actually creates more damage. Or it doesn't really help as much. Can you explain to everyone out there who wears helmets? Because I get hit, you must hear this, or mouth guards as well.
Yeah.
What are your opinions?
Okay, so look, first things first, I ride a bike, all right, I'm a mammal.
He's an endurance athlete and he wears these tights. And all academics wear those full body suits.
Yeah, no, I don't.
Do you still, you
I don't do the whole full body suit,
Oh, but
I wear a cycling attire.
See? They all do it, and he still does it. But you're my favourite, though. But still, you
here we
can do
go.
it. You're my favourite. Come on. But they all do it. So you still
Why
ride.
am I doing this?
How many comments do you ride a week?
I'll try and ride about 70 to 80 a week, but I've got to do it because, I've got to try and stay fit.
Yeah. I couldn't,
Anyway.
Yeah, keep going. So keep going.
I will wear a helmet because it protects my skull from fracturing. Okay?
Yep.
So helmets are there for a reason,
Yep.
and they will protect your skull bone from fracturing, and that is what they're there for. They are not there to protect the brain from concussion. The reason why helmets don't protect the brain from a concussion injury is because the brain sits in a fluid called the cerebrospinal fluid.
Yeah.
Now, if you are walking through a door and you knock your head, as you do, or you get up, well, ouch, the cerebrospinal fluid is there to protect the brain from, a bit of impact shock. Okay, so that's one of the roles of the cerebrospinal fluid,
So that's like a helmet within itself.
Well, it just sits in a, it's sort of in a fluid to allow a little bit of movement.
That's also to make sure it doesn't get too much movement. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes and no. So it for very low impacts, it protects the brain because it's a shock absorber.
Okay.
All right. But it also it's there for nutrition, metabolism. It has multiple roles.
Okay.
But when you go beyond a certain level of impact, then the cerebrospinal fluid as a shock absorber starts to work against the brain from moving.
Okay.
So it's almost like the analogy of being in a car, and when a car gets hit, you still keep moving.
Okay.
All right?
Okay. So yeah.
So when you get hit, the brain will move, and that movement can possibly push the brain up against the skull. But it can also push and stretch and shear the brain tissue. So what you have is these stretching and shearing forces that can injure brain cells or neurons.
Kill brain cells.
If it's at a high enough level, then you will have brain cell death. So helmets don't protect the brain from moving, and that's the problem.
So in your opinion, why would players wear helmets then?
Well, there is still this false belief that it protects the brain from concussion.
So it doesn't at all?
No.
Okay.
No.
Is there validity in saying that the extra added weight, external weight on the head, increases the velocities that are going to be placed upon it compared to if there was no helmet or nothing around it?
Possibly.
Therefore, increasing the brain's ability to move and traumatize?
Possibly. Absolutely. But I think you don't need a lot of movement anyway. So there are some helmets now that are coming through that they've shown in laboratory testing, reducing the amount of impact to a testing model head. There's one in particular called the N-Pro, which is showing some good promise. It's a soft. But the concern is still that there is still movement in the brain. So even if you reduce, a 60 G hit down to 30, you are still dealing with movement. You're still dealing with a 30 G hit, for example, or rotational forces being applied. So, this is still the concern. The concern isn't necessarily about the one or two big hits. It's about
the repeated.
Yeah. That's right.
And it builds up.
That's right. And we're still trying to understand what the the overall impact is and why some people struggling and others may not be.
It's a very individual response, isn't it?
Maybe, and it may this is again in the sort of cutting edge area, but it might be due to epigenetics. So people might have a particular gene that may, turn on or off. And again, I'm not a geneticist, so we're still, we've got people looking at that may create the issues that we're seeing in some people, but not others.
It's an interesting area, though, isn't it? I mean, it's just I remember the first time you said to me, and I still remember you people, and you always, Al, when I ask you this, you always say, "How do I remember all this stuff?" I don't know why. I remember things back in my past when I was going through undergrad, like what he might have said, what Al might have said, what people might have said to me that either being rude towards me. I remember all these stuff, right? It builds up. What's it called when long-term memory just builds up, right? And you told me one of the first, as we were on my honours, the brain is the final frontier. We really don't know a lot about the central nervous system. In terms of, if you look at physiology, it's kind of, in my opinion, done to death. Where nothing wrong if you're doing physiology, but motor control, we really don't know enough.
No.
Do you agree? Well,
no, we're still. That's right. It's because it's hidden in the skull.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to, understand it. And as we get better with imaging, we'll learn a bit more about it. But that's still trying to look at something indirectly.
Apparently, we only use such a small part over our overall brain capacity. Have you heard about this? Is that true?
10%.
Yeah.
Myth.
Damn it! Damn it! Is that true?
Complete myth.
Fuck, damn it.
Complete myth.
Hold on, wait. Also, another one. Watch this one. Remember how we talked about, you brought this up with me and I said he'd say that's wrong. What was that thing? Muscle memory.
Yeah, another myth.
See? Hey.
Okay, now I want to define that.
No, wrong.
It's the correct term is motor memory. All right, so when you learn skills, and this is actually a discussion that I had on ABC Sporty program.
Okay.
There's on ABC Radio National we have a program called Sporty, and it's a podcast.
Okay, yep. Who's on it? You're on it?
Myself and Craig Goodman.
Craig Goodman is
he's a muscle physiologist from Vic Uni.
Okay, yep.
And we talked about the terminologies of muscle memory.
Yeah.
But from my perspective, in terms of motor skill acquisition, motor skill retention, why someone can pick up a tennis racket after not hitting a ball for 10 years and still, hit relatively well, is not due to muscle memory, it's due to motor memory.
Yep.
So it's the motor skill engrams
You've
in
still
the
got
brain.
The pattern, the pathway.
That's right. That then determine how optimally you contract the muscles,
Yeah.
what muscles you use, how the sequence.
Time coordination.
Yep.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
See?
But the term muscle memory is
It's
still.
more. They think morphology. We think neurological.
Yeah. So there's a Danish group that have just published some data on looking at can't think of it.
You talk about the epigenetic memory of the actual
Molly
muscle.
I've read that one.
Yeah,
we've read it.
But what
Nature.
you're talking about is sorry.
It was published in Nature. Is that the same word?
That's right.
Yeah, we've read that one.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Well, there's a lot of people who are still not skeptical, who are quite skeptical of that.
I was completely skeptical.
But what they're talking about is that if someone trains and they obviously get some hypertrophy, if they stop training, obviously they have atrophy. But if that person starts to
They're going to go quick.
their training gains are quicker than someone being completely novel.
But my question to you is this, right? What drives and controls the movement? The nervous system.
Yeah, so it's an operational definition between muscle morphology and motor skill.
They're physiology guys.
They're different things we're talking about.
Yeah, and exactly. But I understand what they're saying, right? They're saying that you'll be able to learn you'll pick up the skill quicker, but that's driven from the motor cortex. That's not driven from the muscle fibre. Dawson said it best. Dawson said, "Find me a motor cortex inside a muscle." There is none.
No.
So, how does that make any sense? When I first read that study, I thought you'd say that because they're talking about, and I can understand to an extent how they're going to learn the pattern quicker. It might be true in terms of muscle morphology, the hypertrophy side of it. Yeah, okay, but in terms of, it's the nervous system that drives the movement. It's the engrams that
But
alert
we're
it.
still talking about two different things.
Yeah, two different things, yeah. But still, when I read that, I was like, kind of
When they
like,
say muscle memory, they mean it's a term, like a muscle memory at the DNA level, that the muscle is remembering what previously happened.
cellular.
Well, it's
Because they're talking about one of the organelles within the muscle fiber, within the sarcoplasmic reticulum.
But isn't it also related to epigenetics and how?
I'm not sure with that study. Okay. Not sure. But they were talking specifically about that because one of the concerns out of this is, people who've been on
steroids.
Yeah.
We talked about this actually. Yeah.
What do you think of that about relating to this?
Oh, look, it's outside my area, so
We go down. Here's another issue with academia.
I'm just a neuroscientist.
You know the one with the thing about academia as well, and you can agree to this. There's a lot of this guy said this, then he brings that out, and then studies can be flawed. A lot of people take what the heading is and say, oh, but this study said this. Woody, that said this, and as you know, you need to delve deep into a study, and this is where the difference between someone who actually understands to read studies and, like, I understand enough because you taught me. Most people just read the title, and if you understand that, right? Yeah. You have to delve deep. How many subjects did they have? What was the methods behind it? Most people don't do that.
No, it's the meat of the sandwich that's really difficult for people to understand, and you do need a lot of training in that area
understand it,
to work out what they do and why they do it.
Yeah. And also another thing is there someone working behind the scenes, a beneficiary to it? Like example, there was a study that came out.
Every study has some potential conflicts of interest because of, and that's what you have to be aware of.
Because a big name company bought out. I won't say, but it's a health supplement company. Anyway, they put out this study to say that taking their product, they had greater MRI in terms of greater brain activity after taking it. And you look through the study and said, well, who funded it? And it was the company's sister's company that funded it. Of course, what else are they going to come out with? I mean, you need to start looking more deeper into studies and finding out who's financing it. But that's not science. Science it's got to be impartial. That's true science.
Is
science
ever impartial though?
No,
It's
hard. No, it's very difficult. But this is where the systematic review and meta-analysis can help tease out, because you can start to look at the effect sizes, which are differences between groups or differences between pre and post condition or intervention. And if you get a number of studies, then you can start to look at the trends or the effect sizes that suggest that, look, this actually is a phenomena that's real, or actually, no, there's nothing there.
Okay. Let's do
back to, you were talking about recovery, like how to recover from a concussion. My personal question here, have you seen any validity behind taking DHA, fatty acid supplements, omega supplements to help the brain recover? Because we know the brain is largely made up of fatty acids. Have you seen any of that? Dosages, would you recommend it? Yeah.
At this stage, no.
Really?
Hasn't been anything that's effective. It just hasn't got enough to get through the blood-brain barrier to actually affect change.
Okay.
Have there been studies on that?
Very not strong studies, not well-designed RCTs.
Do you think it's even worth experimenting with like this?
Oh, look, maybe, but I think the underlying, theory behind it isn't strong enough to even warrant. So at this stage, no.
So your main things would be build up light, moderate exercise. Don't put yourself in a dark room where you're sedentary. Yep. Is there anything else you would recommend?
Look, we'd like to trial, possibly brain stimulation, but we need to look at
electric.
Yeah. Well, electrical light. So there's a technique that Dawson and I use called transcranial direct current stimulation, which is very light electrical activities that can change the threshold of firing for neurons.
Oh shit.
So you generally try and use that prior to doing some rehab to try and prime the brain.
That's like a priming exercise.
Yeah, we've used it in strength training. So we've primed the brain prior to a strength training and shown increases in strength output and excitability with TMS.
So you got performance improvements and you had neurophysiological increases.
Yeah. So
can you do it to me?
I think you don't need any further excitation.
Oh, come on, man, come on.
We can reverse the polarity.
No, I want stimulation. Oh, wait, just with that. Just
you don't need any more stimulation.
With that,
come on, mate.
Do you stimulate? You still stimulate the frontal lobe? So it's all stimulated at the M1?
Yeah. So if we're looking at motor activities, then we'll put the montage over the motor cortex. If we're trying to look at cognitive, then we might go over the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is more further in front. So it depends on what we're trying
for.
to.
Okay. That's sick. That's so cool.
Elite sports conditioning. I would like Dr. Allen to speak about thoughts on improving neck strength through specific weighted exercises to reduce concussion.
At the moment, it's actually one of the studies that we're doing at the moment is to try and look at the evidence for neck strength training. It's promising, but we don't know how much at this stage. So we don't know the overall effect. So what I just talked about before in terms of doing a meta-analysis and seeing what the effectiveness is on neck strength training on reducing the risk of concussion or I don't know. So we actually don't, I can't put a number on, 10% improvement, 20% improvement, or if you can improve your neck strength by 20%, then you'll reduce your concussion risk by 50%. We don't know. So maybe I can come back to you in about 6 months on that. But the anecdotal evidence from what we're seeing loosely from studies that we're reading up is that there is some benefit, particularly with female athletes. That is potentially an area that we could utilise it for. So it's certainly, I would recommend
doing some sort of
strength training, but I think also it might need to be in a dynamic sense as well. So it's not just static neck strength training, this sort of stuff. It's trying to do stuff in a more applied environment as well.
Yeah. I
wouldn't know how you would actually develop that. That can be something for you to think about.
Yeah.
But
we do. It's actually funny you say that because we do the neck strength. We lateral flexion. You've seen. I do it with my rugby athletes, gridiron athletes, all actually boxing athletes as well. You do that neck strengthening stuff. But you're right. It's got to be more. I've been trying to think about it in terms of dynamic. I mean, how you do it.
Well, the other thing too is that rotational forces create a greater risk of concussion than linear. So if you're just doing this or that, that's fine.
So it's rotational.
But if you want to knock someone out, get your boxing buddy to tell you, you will actually induce a rotation.
Yeah.
Okay. Linear hits can be fine.
But
it's that. So when you see someone really get concussed, it's because someone has come in from the side and you'll see a rotation of the head.
That kick was on the side and she went like that. Yeah. Amir Khan got knocked out by Canelo, and when he knocked him out, it was in slow-mo. It was like literally, Amir Khan got hit so hard, he was out for 5-6 minutes, and I just imagine the concussion and the trauma on the brain after a hit like that.
Yeah, exactly. So it then comes into, well, what type of strength training do you need to do? And so I think if we're logical and methodological about this, that we just need to see how effective strength training is first for the neck. Yeah. And then we can move on and go, okay, how do we improve
on that from there?
What is the theory and mechanism behind why neck strength training actually helps? Like, what's your understanding of the physiology behind it?
So the idea is to try and reduce the amount of movement in the brain. So like we said before with the helmets, you've got that movement still occurring. If you can try and reduce that movement on shearing and stretching and rotational forces in the brain tissue, theoretically, it might mean that we can reduce the risk of concussion.
So the neck muscles, sternocleidomastoid, levator scapula, etc., they act like suspension almost for the head.
They just stabilizes.
Like if you talk about like a car, if you want to explain it to a layman's person, they help stabilize the head during.
Just to minimise what he's saying is it stabilises it's pretty much minimising the amount of movement. That's all it is, isn't it? That's pretty much minimising the amount of movement. But it's funny though, how many, like we did it the Americans have a massive focus on it, the shrugs, all that stuff, but we wouldn't even know exactly what you said. We need to first work out, does strength training, and this is where you're right, the meta-analysis stops any bullshit. I mean, that's work out, okay, over these studies, what did we find? I think that's the biggest thing. But we're so, in terms of concussive research, we're very far behind, aren't we?
Yeah, we're really far behind because there's not enough support and funding
no
research
funding
going
for
into it.
No. There's none. I found out a few other things about. There's no. We've got big leagues here, and they're putting no money towards it, none at all.
Yeah, look, to be fair to the big leagues, they're in the business of sport entertainment. Yeah. They're not a research institute.
Yeah, true.
Obviously, they've got to have policies and procedures on what we do with a concussed athlete and return to play and all that. Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, it would be nice for them to invest some money, and they do. But I think they could invest some more money and make it, objective, competitive funding.
Model,
Yep. But when you're looking at America,
if there's actually a question, when they put out a model for funding, they just give it to their mates. Do you reckon it's just like, he knows him, or?
I'm not sure.
You're not sure?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
That's a rabbit hole you probably don't know. But my personal opinion is, I'll be about most sports, and I feel like it's just like, this guy's mates with him, so we'll just give him the grant. It's not really.
He said that.
It's not. I'll be open there. I know that for a fact. You didn't say that. I'm open to the fact.
I've already been crucified in the media, so I'm not going to go there.
So I feel that way. Like with a guy like you, I feel like that you were a bit ostracised because you came out with data that people didn't like, and all because of that, they'll ostracise you. But all you're trying to do is be a scientist, and a scientist is impartial. And I've known you for a long time. You're a good person.
Shucks.
He's a good person, but I always told you, I remember sitting back I told you, I'll bring this up again, is, once you're friends with me and I trust you and I'll be loyal to you for life. I told you that when you told me yesterday. Be loyal for life. Right? My thing is, when I don't run from anyone, regardless of whoever says, this guy, he said this and he's in with this organisation, whatever. But a lot of people in society today want to backstab you, then move up a rank. For me, I couldn't give a flying fuck, really. Once I'm on someone's side, I'll ride with you and we'll go for life. So fuck it. So my thing is, listen, I think Alan's what he's doing is fantastic. So what I'm trying to do is we're trying to get Alan some funding as well, which we're going to work out. So when I come back from Perth, I'm going to come...
Hometown.
Huh?
Hometown.
Yeah, hometown. Yeah, I'm going to Perth for 2 weeks. So for you guys all know, I'm going there for 4 workshops. But when I come back, we're going to look at trying getting more funding on this, because I think it's an area that I don't think people will be shelving out money to you know what I'm saying, like shelving out money. Yeah. How many grants are out there for concussion at the moment?
Well, barely nothing. So, there's probably about $5 to $6 million in research in Australia at the moment, in various people and groups, looking at different things. From my calculations, I'm not part of that, for the record.
Will you ever be?
Yeah, no. But in America, they're investing probably about $100 million into this. Yeah. So my friends at Boston, for example, they'll receive $15, $20 million in grants. Probably.
Did you move over there just to get that opportunity?
I've been asked to, and I've been, sort of hinted to go, but my passion is to try and do something here in Australia.
See?
So I really want to look at Australian sports.
Not America, yeah.
And, if I went to America too, and this sounds a little bit selfish, but if I went to America, I'd be one of thousands of concussion researchers, whereas here in Australia, I've got an opportunity of trying to do something. We've probably only got a few dozen, maybe, if that.
If you would even have that, though.
Maybe less than a dozen people.
I'd say you have 10. You could be the number one. Actually, you are the number one. And we're going to do things number one. You hear Al, number one. You don't say no. You don't say, mate. You don't say it like that either. You say, listen.
It's not about competition.
Well, Alan.
I'm here to look after.
Yeah, I know. But at the end of the day. Oh, here we go. Listen, if I do say I want to be the best, I don't want someone to go to me, who's this? I want to be the best at whatever I do, and I want to work with the best. That's why.
I want to be the best, but it's not to be number one. Okay, being
if
the
you're
best
not
is
first,
just being.
You're last.
It's being the best at what you do.
I'm joking.
Okay.
But in America, so there's a lot of research.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And here, there's probably
they're 10 years ahead of us.
Really?
10 years.
That's interesting, because we're talked about in sports science as being the best, which we probably are, right, in terms of the leading research. But concussion, which is such an important topic, they're 10 years ahead.
Look, I base that on, so every month the PubMed, which is the Public Medicine Institute in America, releases new research in any area. So if you want to look at the latest research in sport and exercise science, all you need to do is type in some keywords and you get monthly updates on all new research in sport and exercise science, or you can specify it to strength and conditioning. You can do it in concussion as well. And look, every month there's probably about 50 to 60 papers that come out in concussion every month from around the world. Australia would be lucky to have 1 or 2 every second or third month. In America, most of those papers that come out are from the USA.
Whoa.
So
there's a lot of papers, that's good.
yeah, it's across all the areas. So, you know, it's things obviously like physiology, it's things like exercise, but it's also socio-cultural aspects of concussion, epidemiology of rates of concussion, even you know, medical aspects, not just sport, but in, you know, workplace, school. So it's right across. It's a community issue. It's not just a sport issue.
Well, yeah, you was going to say it wasn't just a sport issue.
Yeah.
What was Christian Woodford like as an honours student?
Stop.
Was he one of your favourites?
Who wrote that?
I saw that on Insta last night.
Fuck you, you fuck. What the hell?
Do you want to? Yeah, let's. Do you want to? We'll finish on that one as a funny one.
Yeah, great, fantastic. Far out.
He was very interesting.
I'm just
He was.
What was your first impression? What was the first thing?
I was scared.
Shit.
It was like this Force 10 hurricane that came into the office.
I did.
And yeah, I was a bit intimidated, to be honest.
Oh, I like. See, I told you.
Yeah. I mean, look at him. Shit.
No, I didn't have tats. I had no tats.
You did.
back
You had a couple.
then. Oh, did I?
Yeah, you had a couple.
Wow.
Yeah. And I kind of wondered what I was going to get myself into, you know. So I was like, oh shit. But look, you know, it was a great year. It was good fun, and it was, you know, made it really fun because we were able to have a bit of fun in the lab, and that's what I wanted to have as well. It's not just having a very serious intellectual conversation all the time. Oh, look at you, my God.
What? I'm trying to let you speak. I'm just trying to let you speak. I mean, all I remember from it is, I'll be honest with you, people always ask me what was my favourite year, and I didn't enjoy academia, but I enjoyed what I learned from Alan. And do you understand that? You can understand academia in terms of...
Sometimes I get a little bit upset about that because,
No, but it's not that...
because if it wasn't for me to be in academia, you wouldn't have an opportunity.
Yeah, true.
And I
Good point.
think we have to admit that, you know, academia can have its pros and cons.
Oh yeah, of course.
But at the same time, you know, we need to have people who are able to, you know, educate and give opportunities, and through academia we can do that.
That's
and
true.
so, you know, it'd be nice to have some, you know, not too bag academics too much about.
Yeah, hold on. I bag the academic. You understand, right?
Now you know why I get intimidated. Look at you.
I'm always on you.
Oh, it's Force 10 coming through.
I think the guys like you, I just feel like there's a lot of researchers who don't care, and that's what I get upset about, right? It's like, you care, right? And that's in every job, I guess, you know, every business. But I mean, for me, I enjoyed the learning, like that learning. Like, I remember you said to me, you need to read, like I told you, I had that folder of literature. Like, if you want to do an honours, I wouldn't even know what it's like doing a PhD. I mean, but, you know, and God, you know, the amount of literature you need to read on a certain topic is massive, and you got to understand it back to front.
Look, one of the things about a PhD, obviously you do have to read a lot, okay, because you've got to understand
The topic.
You've got to understand a lot about something very small. But a PhD as well is a apprenticeship in research. It's about learning how to do science. Science is a method. You know, it's understanding, you know, how to answer a question methodically, systematically.
Objectively.
And objectively, yeah,
Ooh.
absolutely. Yes, very good.
I've learned a few things.
Yeah,
you know
that's
that.
right.
Come on, eh?
So it's about as much about learning how to do that, because one of the things we've got to be, you know, if people can sprout out a lot of content or knowledge, yeah, look, that's great, but that's not being scientific.
True.
Being scientific is to be, okay, we've got a problem, we've got to be able to answer that by going through and trying to work out what the answer is without any confounds or other things that could influence it. And that is what science is about. Okay, science is not about talking about the latest research study. or how much information I can blurt out of my head in one go.
I feel like people want to throw the entire baby out with the bathwater, Shandor. They want to throw the baby out with the bathwater when a new study comes out, it's brand new and improved. But where you sit back, and to me, a scientist sits back, takes all in and says, okay, that's okay, but we've had this body of evidence. Just because this has come out doesn't mean we have to throw all this other... I mean, Semler and Anoka, you know, Roger Anoka's a massive... I think he's probably passed away now, Roger Anoka.
No, he's not yet, no.
Cut that one out. But Roger Anoka, I used to read Roger Anoka's paper. He did his first paper a long time ago on neurological
right.
but that's still, in 1950, whatever, it still applies today.
Well, it does, but it's also the body work. So,
exactly,
you know, one of the things about science is that you've got to be able to replicate results. Or you've got to look at if a study is showing the same results, why is that? If it's not showing that, why is that as well? And that's the whole thing about variability in what we find. We need to do the meta-analysis to look at trends and effect sizes and things like that. And so it's not just about doing one study is the definitive answer. It's about doing a body of work and finding out exactly.
So it's all to do with the accumulation of work and then and then understanding the topic.
If we relied on a single study, we would be in a lot of trouble.
We'd be fucked. You just use the word fucked, Alan. That's fine.
All right, it's fucked.
See, now, do you know what? If I had Dawson here, he'd just turn around and go, "That's fucked." That's what I like about him. He's just first time I met, he's like, "Oh, fuck this. I like that."
Before we cut, I got one really important.
Well, don't make sure it's not too fucking long, right? So go.
How do you put up with him?
We've got. Mate, are you serious? We've been around the world. Him and I.
Did you see the photo? You just posted about all these staff that just leave and put the X's on the head.
No, you didn't see that one. No.
There's two left.
No, there's one left. That's Jay.
Anyway, really important. Juniors, young kids who get concussions, who come through sports, they play AFL, soccer, these contact sports. What is the implications of getting concussions on brain health and brain development from a young age?
So this has been addressed a lot in America. Some of the, I guess, the best studies have shown that if kids are playing contact sports, so bear in mind this is American football and lacrosse and helmet ice hockey as well. What they've found is that kids who play contact sports before the age of 12 have greater damage to the white matter part of the brain than kids who start contact sport later, after the age of 12. And this can lead to mental health problems, cognitive impairments in their middle age, sort of in their 40s and 50s. So
can
one thing
out there explain the white and grey matter so they understand? He said white matter, there's white matter.
Yeah, so what you have with the brain is the outer areas of the brain is the grey matter. The deeper areas of the brain is the white matter. The reason why they're white is because they are the nerve cells are covered in a sheath called the myelin sheath, which is white in colour. It gives it that whitish appearance. Good, well done.
Took an 8?
Yeah.
Yes.
And the white matter part of the brain is kind of like the highway, and it connects different areas of the grey matter to each other. All right, so whilst you can, if you do get damage to the white matter, it can stop areas of the
development.
different development, but other parts of the brain to effectively connect to each other.
Can I also, one thing as well, it's very important during a junior age, a fully fledged nervous system development is 24 years of age, right? At the
they're showing. Is that right, Alan?
They're actually showing it's longer than that. So
brain maturity is
up to you. I'm like, it's interesting.
Yeah, brain maturity is probably getting closer to 30 now.
Really?
What does brain maturity mean though?
Okay,
when you.
I call it putty.
No, don't call it putty.
Oh, hold on.
No, don't call it putty.
No, what I'm saying is, but do you...
Can I finish my question first, then we'll talk about the putty?
Okay, I want to talk about this after.
Yeah, all right.
But I'm right with the putty. Please tell me putty.
Okay, so what's happened in America as a result of these studies is that there are a number of states now trying, or actually have stopped contact football in particular, because it's probably the most obvious sport, for under the age of 12 years of age. So they play touch football or flag football before up to the age of 12, then they can start contact sport.
Makes sense, yeah.
And so the issue is the fact that the developing brain, whilst it's developing, if you do start to get hits and impacts, it can potentially create abnormal development, which goes against previous traditional thinking where neuroplasticity, the idea that neuroplasticity would overcome that. And it's a bit like, I guess, kids and smoking. your brain, your lungs do not, rehabilitate as well if you're smoking as a kid. So if you're having some abnormal development during those peak critical times as an adolescent, then it could implicate down the track.
Just neuroplasticity, everyone for that don't understand, neuroplasticity is the ability of the brain to adapt.
And we'll talk about that in terms of putty.
But how is putty wrong?
Okay, so the brain is not putty.
But everyone like a lot of people use
and
it.
I've actually, in public seminars and presentations I've done, I don't like the term putty.
How about this one, clay?
No.
Fuck. How about this one?
Because
tell me why.
it gives the wrong impression of what neuroplasticity is.
Okay.
Neuroplasticity is reorganisation of the brain. Now, reorganisation of the brain is not like putty. Reorganisation of the brain is different areas being able to overcome and take over if there's a damage. Okay. So, for example, the reason why I did get involved in brain injury was because when I was doing my PhD, the postdoctoral fellow there was doing some work in stroke. Okay, now we've got to go think about this from the 1990s. Neuroplasticity as a word was not even allowed to be used. What was happening with the stroke patients was postdoc was looking at it using TMS. It was just all it was just an exploratory study. What happens to people after a stroke? We didn't even know at that stage. Neurophysiotherapy wasn't even a discipline. People were stabilised after stroke. The neurologists would say, "Thanks very much. You're stabilised. See you later. Good luck with the rest of your life." And so there was nothing for people to go to. Physios had nothing to offer. Doctors had nothing to offer. So they were coming into the lab, and Michelle was the postdoc, and she was looking at what was happening. And what happened was that one group actually started to self-select into two groups, and one group sort of went, "Oh, yeah, look, I got told by my doctor to come into this study. I'll do it. I'm happy to do it, but I don't really care. I just want to watch TV, and I don't care if I live or die." All right?
Shit.
The other group were like, "Oh, look, I haven't been told anything. Like, I'm coming into the study. I'm happy to help you. Do you think gardening might help me?" "Oh, well, we don't know." Okay. Someone else will come in and go, "Oh, I might try and use fork and knife. I'm trying to make myself. Is that a good thing?"
We don't know.
No. But what we found was the group that were trying to make themselves do something,
Strength the pathway.
there were changes, okay? And it wasn't a change in the brain. That part of the brain that had the stroke was dead. Other parts of the brain other parts of the motor cortex that may have been, once used for shoulder or, in this case, shoulder, then started to take over the areas for the hand.
Okay.
That is neuroplasticity. There is no morphological change like putty or clay. It's a physiological change that another area can take over.
Yeah, okay.
And so...
Then tell me what to use instead of clay and I can help you out here. Well, how can you say it without someone... I understand why... I use the word... The reason why I use it is like...
Yes, but it gives the wrong impression.
I know Alan, but... hold on, I know Alan. What I'm saying is, I agree, that makes complete sense, and yes, that is a very... Yes, you are the man, but...
It's called
reorganisation.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
But how about this when they're younger, right? And their central nervous system is developing. Fantastic for me, I'll be honest with you, for him as well, because you did, it has obviously fully matured central nervous system, now 30 years old, right? That's obviously...
Yeah.
That means, but you can still develop, what I'm trying to say is, right? People say this, Alan, when athletes are younger, right, the best time to develop... Well, any time's the best time to develop strength, power, speed. But in terms of junior athlete development, during that window, apparently 8 to 15 years old, 16 years old is the best time.
Oh, they're critical periods.
Critical periods, right? Yeah. And you'd say that's still a critical period.
Absolutely.
Right? Okay. What I've been told is, once the central nervous system is fully matured, now, I used to think it was 24, now 30, it's still possible to reorganise and learn, but it's at a slower rate compared to that critical time.
Well, yes, but you can learn new skills at 80 years of age.
Of course, yes, but I think that
so that's the other concept of neuroplasticity, is that the ability to learn something doesn't stop at the maturity. That was traditional thinking. So the old traditional thinking was that the brain was immutable to change
Yep, correct.
at maturity, whether that was once thought at 20 or 25
Whatever it
or
was.
30.
Yeah.
What we're finding out now is that, and this is, again, going back to the stroke study, these people were in their 60s, they lost the ability, through hemiparesis of the hand or the arm, they were then able to start to regain movement. So that's learning. That is learning. That shows that the ability of the brain to reorganise and to learn new skills.
Yeah.
So we've seen that the whole time.
Also, cross-education as well.
Well, that's more of a, I guess, evidence for the neural aspect of strength training and motor skill acquisition.
Yeah.
So the idea is that if you are training one limb, the other limb can get improvements without any training at all.
For everyone who doesn't understand, so I'll quickly say this. I know I could go on, I think it's fantastic, go on all day, but you've got two hemispheres of the brain. Your left controls your right controls left. Am I correct in saying that?
Mostly, yep.
Why do you say mostly?
Because it's probably about 95-5. There are some ipsilateral connections.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
So not, but majority.
So we talk about contralateral,
Which
so
is
right hemisphere to left. Yep.
Ipsilateral is
the same side.
Same side.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Woo! Jeez. See, it's blown my mind about the clay thing because that's really harmed me right now. I'll be honest with you. So
I'm glad you're going to learn something new. Here's a bit of neuroplasticity in action.
Hold on, wait. So I'm not going to use the word clay. That's fine, Alan. That's fine. Because I do use your quote. That's fine, Alan. Because the amount of people who use the word clay and putty is ridiculous, right? And I push it heavily because that's...
Yeah.
But I understand reorganisation. I just don't... I'm a man of habit, and it's pissed me off now with that, but...
But that's again, if you can change then that's
the plasticity.
Yeah.
What does it mean for the brain to be fully matured by 30s or late 20s?
So they're just talking about, I guess, neural connections, the amount of neural connections, even though that can still change over time, the peak development of neural cells. I can send the study. I mean, it's hard to explain off the top of my head because that wasn't exactly what I was preparing myself for today, to be honest. Yeah, absolutely. But you do see, I guess, activation changes, and what they're saying now is probably up to about the age of 30.
Does that mean that theoretically it would be better for the brain to get a concussion after it's fully matured than before?
It wouldn't be good to get a concussion any time. It's an injury. Yeah.
But what he's saying is, I'm guessing what he's saying. I think what you're saying is,
if I'm going to take up a striking martial arts sport, or I'm going to get hit in the head,
you'd rather take
should I wait for my brain health? I'm very concerned about it. Should I wait until I'm fully matured, brain-wise?
It's hard for him to say. I know what you're saying.
I would just blanket
You don't want one, no.
You would what?
I'd just say blanket
no. What are you saying? You don't want one ever.
That's right. If you want to take up a combat sport, then just do it for the fitness of it.
Right.
I'm probably going to get into massive trouble, but
good, more.
But
violent.
Hey,
hey.
That's a pretty safe answer.
No, but what he's saying is, what you're saying is, people get really angry if it's their sport. Oh, we how you down, and all you're saying is trying to look after. When I come back, we're going to sit down, have a coffee. He loves his coffees and mochachinos, but we want to talk about trying to also getting Alan some funding for this stuff. So we're going to look at ideas. We're going to try and do some research, but try and get him some funding because this is an area that doesn't get enough funding, and I want to try and help him get funding with my profile, with my platform. Pay it forward to the great man. I actually want to help out. I think it's an area that is not, I've got enough connections now with football. You look at football, a lot of my mates are footballers. I've got a lot of combat sport athletes, as you know. This is stuff we need to learn about. So if everyone out there, if you are watching this, first of all, how can they get in contact with you? There might be, I know a lot of presidents, coaches, football players that have been concussed. Where can they get in contact with you if they need to know?
They can email me, alan.pearce@latrobe.edu.au, which is, you could probably put that on your...
Well, no, he'll put that on, we'll put that down below.
And also I have a website called neuropierce.com.
Neuropierce.com to go there. Do you have anything to say before you were going to say something?
You're welcome.
Yeah. So, from my perspective, I just think you're a great guy, Alan. I'm glad we reconnected again, and thank you for everything you did for me, because I wouldn't be in this position without you.
No worries.
Thank you very much. You're an absolute legend of bloke. And also, honestly, and for me, he's as my mother said, my mum missed out not coming down here. She goes, "How did he put up with you?" I don't know how he did, because I was the best. That's all it is. As I said, episode 30. 47? Fucking, I forgot. 47, Ask Woodford for neuroplasticity right there. Thanks for watching, guys. Watch for future projects with this man. Thank you for coming on the show, and I'll see you guys next week or the week after, episode 38. For 48, Ask Woodford. Thanks, guys.